Tim, you mentioned kind of the CMHC sticking to its knitting a little bit. Go into that in a little bit more detail. Tell us what they should be doing versus where they've veered off, perhaps.
Yeah, so in a couple ways, the CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, has a proud history. It's been a strength in Canada in helping aspiring middle-class people get into the home ownership market. I mentioned earlier how they helped World War II veterans, for example, and now they're looking at ways of helping more entrepreneurs who have risk in their jobs and have a steady payroll get housing as well. So here's two areas that they should really be focusing on. Working with the provinces and municipalities to incent more home development in areas that people can't afford. For example, and help securing financing for purpose-built rentals, or help secure financing for duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, the kind of entry-level housing that we have a lack of across our province. The second area the CMHC can be very helpful is financing mechanisms that recognize modern alternatives. So let me explain. Traditionally, most of us would have gone to a bank or credit union to get a mortgage. We're single owners of a home. There are now possibilities using financial technology to have other investors in your home. Maybe it's a friend, it's a roommate, you both own the home. Or what's often happening is more patient money locked up in pensions, for example, or investors will co-own your home, and you pay them off over time by paying them a bit more as if it were rent. Or Tony, when you sell your house, they get part of the upside. These are modern models that can help people get into the marketplace because getting that down payment is usually more expensive and difficult than getting the mortgage. But our rules built in the 1970s and 1980s really exclude these new financing options. Let's modernize and help more people get into the market.
But you're not talking about, say, like the derivatives that were created before 2008, where basically they were mortgage-backed securities that people really didn't have an idea I'm talking in the United States now. They didn't really have any idea what they really were. But you're not talking about that.
No, nothing of that nature. And we do take, largely much more small C conservative approach, as you know, to housing financing in Canada. That is a strength of ours because we didn't get hit the same way as Americans did in 2008, 2009. But let me give you an example of what has worked in other countries like the UK. So my wife, Debbie, and I wanted to buy a home. We can make the mortgage payments with our combined incomes, but getting that down payment is increasingly tricky. So we can go to a financing app supported by a pension. We would pay 80% of the price of the down payment. They would pay 20%. Effectively, they would own 20% of our home, and we could pay them off over time, so we own it 100%. Or when we sell the house, we get 80% of the benefits, and they get 20%. It's a very sensible model that can actually work and help people get into the market with that down payment. But we have outdated rules when it comes to mortgage financing or provincial laws that stand in the way to a very reasonable and modern approach.
Very interesting. So do you know of any provinces in Canada that are starting to reform this kind of financing or accessibility to home ownership?
Yeah, and BC is ahead of us. So they've begun this. It's quite common in the US and the UK. But there is positive news here. I want to commend Premier Ford and particularly the Housing Minister, Steve Clark. They brought in legislation called the More Homes, More Choice Act. We were happy because they took 8 of 10 of our recommendations. So that's kind of an A where we'd like to see that. But it made the biggest difference probably in several generations, Tony, in increasing housing supply. We had a record number of new homes built in 2020, for example, than the previous 2 decades. So that's a very good start. And they are also looking at provincial legislation and regulations that stand in the way to those new financing tools I mentioned. We hope to hear more about that in the time ahead, but they're very interested in tearing away that red tape.
And they seem to be using, unless I'm mistaken, tools like the municipal zoning orders to make sure that municipalities are not an impediment to home building. Is that right?
Yeah, and they should do more of that. So a municipal zoning order is a power that's existed for some time for Municipal Affairs Ministry. You were in that position, if I recall, some time ago, that allows them to override some of the conflicting, local rules, regulations, and all the different agencies, boards, and commissions you have to do business with that delay projects and drive up costs. Effectively, the province has done this for housing that are housing projects that have affordable housing as part of that, or for job creation centers. Has enabled projects that would normally take several years to happen much more quickly. But honest to goodness, Tony, when you hear that a subdivision in Ontario today can take up to 10 years to get a project approved in the city of Toronto for even a couple of homes, 2 years, every month of delay drives up costs even more and means that home is further from the fingertips of a hardworking middle-class Ontario family.